fourth video of this week, but a lot of information has come out actually about half an hour after we went off air. The Bills announced that they have released John Brown. John Brown was with the Bills for 2 years. Last season he was injured for half of the year and was never 100% when he came back. The year prior, though, he had 1,000 yards, in which he had on his Instagram, he was thanking the Bills Mafia, for a great 2 years that he had with the organization. Now, due to all these cap casualties that have been happening, and a lot of people don't know why these cap casualties are happening, or so many of them are happening. Well, quite a bit of them happen, but due to the fact that the ceiling of the salary cap is so low this year, it's harder for teams to keep those guys to make, because they said yesterday on NFL Total Access, Ian Rappaport said that 10 teams out of the 32 are still over the cap. So they're still trying to make more cap casualties happen, unfortunately, or restructurings, or new contracts, or whatever, so they don't have to deal with it right now. But another player that got released was Kenny Vaccaro. Kenny Vaccaro was the safety for the Tennessee Titans, who before was the safety for the New Orleans Saints. He was released. Another cap-saving move. The cap casualty is not a fun thing to be a part of, but it is part of the business. It's what everyone in the NFL calls being an NFL journeyman. You go from team to team every few years, and that's just, it's very difficult. It's very difficult for like a player like, when you see players like Roger Staubach play his whole career, Walter Payton play his whole career in the same place. That's not common anymore. Now you got players like, Brady played 20 years in New England and then left and went to Tampa. Peyton Manning played for a long time. He played about 13 years, 14 years in Indianapolis, and then moved to Denver. Went to Denver. It just happens. It's how the game is played. There's unlike, you can't seem to play your whole career with one team all the time. It doesn't work like that. Another release was the Giants had released guard Kevin Zeitler. They were trying to shop him around, see if they could get trades, but no one came calling, or at least with a good offer for him. So he was released. As well as the Dolphins made it official. They released Kyle Van Noy after again trying to trade him. It just didn't happen. So he was released. The Cowboys had cut their fullback, Jameis Olawale, who opted out of this past season, but they only saved under $1 million. But if the Cowboys would have marked this as a June 1st cut, they would save $2 million instead. So it's just depending on how they do it. But they were doing this because they're trying to make room for Dak and new contracts and draft picks and all that stuff. As well as they restructured Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, and Lyle Collins, which means that Tyron Smith is not going to retire, means Lyle Collins is not going to retire. In doing that, the Cowboys also saved $18,750,000 to do that, on top of the other $17-18 million that they already had. So creating about 36 million, and to know how much the Cowboys would have now, it's about the same way it was, about 14 to 18 million dollars. They did it primarily so Dak's contract will all fit in, and the Cowboys could, for instance, still do it. They could still restructure contracts, because all the restructure is the owner has to go, or whoever has to write an email to the person saying to the player, hey, we're moving your salary of this year into bonus money. So you're not going to get like your salary, but you're going to get it in bonus. And that's all they have to do. And it's written in the contracts. A lot of teams do this. Most teams do this. It's a very easy way to do it. It saves them time and money because there's no casualty. It's really used to be involved. So, and players like it because it's like, oh, I'm getting paid to do work after, but I'm getting paid before it, and also if I do get hurt, I still get to keep that money. That's awesome. I love that. And it's very simple. A lot of players do it, which we'll get to in a second. The Chiefs, in a surprising move, released both starting tackles, Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz. And the reason why I brought this up is this is very important. In the Super Bowl, the Chiefs didn't have their starting tackles. They were both injured. And they struggled immensely. They couldn't stop anybody. Even when JPP said Mahomes got to be prepared for me, that took all the pressure off the defensive line for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and put all the pressure on the Chiefs' offensive line, saying, hey, we got to swing protection that way, and now Shaquille Barrett's one-on-one with a substitute tackle, with a sub-tackle. It's not going to work. But now you're in a situation, do we try to bring someone in? Do we try... Because Remmers can't play one tackle, and we hope that the other guy will be okay. It's not going to work. It was a very interesting move, and the reason why I brought this up, primarily, was this happened this morning, but also, Mahomes had he had a picture on CBSSports.com. It had Mahomes like, what? Could you at least ask me first? Like if we should get rid of our tackles? Because now we're hoping we draft I'm hoping that we draft somebody or we trade for somebody or get someone cheap because that is good, so I at least have protection. Speaking of releasing tackles, the Vikings have released Riley Reef. I think that's I might have said that wrong, but I think that's how it's said. And he was a starting tackle, but it was a casualty again. They saved $9 million. However, this move that the Saints made, who are still doing this to try to get under the cap, doesn't make any sense. They cut Janoris Jenkins, Jackrabbit Janoris Jenkins, and you say, well, that's a good move. Yes, they ended up saving about $9 million, but they still owe him anywhere between $11 million and $14 million. So they still owe him a lot of money. So it doesn't really make any sense. It's more of, yeah, it worked now until we have to pay him still, because he's still owed that much money. So it really made no sense. But the Eagles restructured Javon Hargrave, the Texans restructured Brandon Cooks, and a lot of restructures do happen. It's pretty much natural. Another team that restructured were the Panthers. They restructured Christian McCaffrey and Shaq Thompson, trying to make room for if they can trade for Russell Wilson, who the Seahawks said that they were prepared to trade Russell Wilson if an offer comes. Basically, they're expecting a king's ransom, if you will. Now, I want to see what that trade would be. Is that 3 first rounders and that's it? Is that 3 first rounders and a player? Or just players? Or just, like, how does that work? And also, where does Teddy Bridgewater go? That's another interesting move. But the reason why I brought up the restructuring of contracts is because a lot of people have been bringing up, well, the Cowboys should just release Ezekiel Elliott or trade Ezekiel Elliott. That's nearly impossible. It is impossible, actually, because the Cowboys, if they were to do that, trade or release, would have to deal with $24 million in dead cap money. It doesn't make sense to trade or release him. And he's also owed. He's gonna make $9 million. He's gonna be making about $15 million this year. $9 million in actual salary. So it doesn't really make sense anyway. And plus, that's the first reason. But the second reason is they don't have anybody else really. Tony Pollard, he's a good setback, but that's all he's really good at. He's good in the receiving game, the kick return game, the punt return game, but he can't. We saw a game against San Francisco. He had, like, I think he had a total of 14 carries for 69 yards, but before that 40-yard run near the end of the game, he had 13 carries for 29 yards. So the production was worse without Zeke than it was with him. So that's my point. It doesn't make sense to release or trade Ezekiel Elliott. But what do you guys think? Should the Carolina Panthers trade for Russell Wilson? And if they do, where does Teddy Bridgewater go?